Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week on the podcast, a bit of a different story and something I'm personally really excited to talk about. I've got Felix Durden on the show. So Felix actually was living a really healthy life, seemingly healthy life, up until the point where he randomly just started developing a number of different symptoms, including debilitating fatigue, but also what was more difficult for him was the depression, the anxiety, and the mental issues he had to go through that was brought on by the illness, and which, it can affect so many people with chronic health issues, but particularly Lyme disease, which is what, after going to, I guess, doing a lot of research online and going to numerous people, was ultimately diagnosed with. And rather than accept the bleak diagnosis and the bleak outlook that you can see online and speaking to other people, Felix went on a journey of searching for his own answers, and in quite unusual places compared to a lot of people, which I think's great and resonates with me. The kind of crazy stuff I've done, the places I've been to across the world to try and help myself and get better, it really resonates. And so he actually found himself in South America, in Peru, and healed himself through plant medicine, ayahuasca. And it's kind of crazy timing, just because I've just been hearing a lot more over the last couple of years about ayahuasca, about plant medicine, and about psychedelics in general. And so it's just really interesting that kind of like mutual friend of ours introduced me to Felix, and just really excited to have such a different story. But also, when you strip it back again, it comes back to that mindset of not accepting this reality, that's this is how it's going to be forever, and searching for different answers. And really excited to have you on, mate. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. So let's could we talk a little bit about could you talk to me what life was like before in terms of health, your situation then, and just what happened, when you developed symptoms, the journey you went on then, and then actually how that led you to be in Peru, and how that got you to the position you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a very healthy person. I was a Beachbody coach for a period of years, selling Insanity and P90X. And I was fit. I was in good shape, mentally, emotionally, physically. And when I contracted Lyme's, all of that really took a very slow decline. It hit me as this flu, and then it started turning into anxiety, depression, extreme fatigue, body aches. It just didn't equate in my life. I just couldn't figure out where this had snuck in. And so in going to the doctors, they're like, okay, well, the first thing we're going to give you is amoxicillin. I'm like, all right, I'll take amoxicillin. It seems like you know what you're talking about. They give me amoxicillin, and it makes me even more sick. It started ruining my body and my mind as well. And I did some more research, and it was like, okay, well, it says you should actually be taking, or I should be taking doxycycline, which is another form of amoxicillin. So they're like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll give you that one too. So they give me that. I start that cycle. Same thing. I get super sick. I feel even more weak. I'm losing tons of weight. I'm like, okay, none of this is working. And now I'm facing anxiety and depression on an even grander scale because my body's just deteriorating. So now what? And I go back to my doctor, and they're like, we're going to give you Ritalin. And I'm like, Ritalin? Like, for what? Like, we're like, well, this will calm you down in those periods of anxiety and depression, and they'll bring you back to normal. And I couldn't take any more pharmaceuticals. Amoxicillin failed me, doxycycline failed me. Ritalin, I've already done research on. It's basically legalized meth. I couldn't take that in my system. And started doing research on natural medicines, and came across marijuana, and which is such a taboo, or it was such a taboo back in the day, and illegal.
What year was this, out of interest?
2008.
2008.
And this is in the States where it's pretty illegal. So
yeah, because you went through a bit of it. Sorry to interrupt. It's just because it's interesting, because I was actually in the States in 2008, and then how it is now, particularly in places like California and stuff, like the attitude towards marijuana is completely different, right?
So different, so different. I mean, I could just hear, you know, I've come from a religious background, so I could just hear my family's voice in the back of my head of like, it's a drug, it's a drug, it's a drug, you know. But the first time I took marijuana, my body pain went away. My anxiety went away. I felt normal for the first time in years, and that just blew me away. And so I was like, okay, there's something in these natural plant medicines. And it came again when somebody brought psilocybin mushrooms into my awareness, which I had never heard of psychedelics. I mean, marijuana was such a taboo for me. And I tried psilocybin mushrooms, and it did the same thing, but it had a longer lasting effect. So it completely removed the anxiety, the depression, and it was the longest stretch of period where I felt normal. And so I'm like, okay, you know, there's something in this. But the funny thing is, in that experience, you know, I go outside and I'm sitting in a chair. This is a very odd experience. Psychedelics are a bit strange. And I hear, you need to go to Peru and you need to drink ayahuasca. And I look around and I go, okay, there's nobody else here. This is really weird. These drugs are weird. But I go home and I Google it. I Google ayahuasca and I spell it terribly wrong. And the first thing that comes up is the Temple of the Way of Light in Iquitos. And I'm like, okay, so this plant just told me I should go to Iquitos or do ayahuasca. And, you know, at this point, just seeing how much the doctors were pushing all these other medications on me that were having little to no effect on my actual general health. The fact that they really didn't have answers on Lyme disease. There wasn't much research on Lyme disease back then. I felt almost helpless. And so when I started touching into these plant medicines, I actually felt like, okay, like I have to step outside the Western paradigm of medicine to try and heal this thing, because there's no way I'm going to live with anxiety, depression, body pain, and later developing an allergy to red meat. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm not giving up on myself. I can't give up on myself. That's my only choice. So yeah. I went down to Peru, and I'm still here. So,
so can you talk to me a little bit about when you first so how old were you when you first started developing symptoms?
About 18.
18, okay.
Yeah.
And then how long was it until you actually got a diagnosis of Lyme?
Well, thanks to my grandmother's extreme paranoia of Lyme disease, I kind of had an inkling in the back of my mind of what it could be.
Yeah.
And as I started researching the symptoms more and more, and especially in the area I was in Maryland, I realized that it's pretty prolific there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I immediately went to my doctor. My doctor recommended me to an infectious disease specialist, and they tested me and they figured it was, okay, it's this bacteria, Lyme disease.
Yeah.
So I tested positive for chronic Lyme's. And I remember just hearing them say that to me was just this weight of like, this thing's with you for the rest of your life. You're screwed, you know. It's like there's no healing.
Yeah. And is that the message that you were getting then regularly from kind of what you were like reading online, you know, from the doctors? Was it very much as I said, that bleak outlook?
Absolutely. I mean, when they said it was chronic Lyme disease, they told me right after that there is no cure. And so they automatically said in my mind of like, there's no way you're going to get through this. You're just going to have to learn to deal with this and have all these other medications that'll keep you normal or at this bar level of what you want to be in. And being from like, you know, a very high functioning human being to like exercising, you know, all these great things in my life, to coming to like, I can barely move in the morning. There's no way I was going to allow that to be my reality, period.
Mm. It's really interesting that a lot of people talk about the bit before you get kind of diagnosed, or someone, you know, whacks a label on you and says, you know, that's like a really tough part mentally. However, the part when you actually get diagnosed, like some people have an initial relief because they're like, this is it. I'm going to take a pill. I'm going to be bad. It's going to be, that's it now, because that's kind of like what we used to. And then when actually a doctor says that to you, that this is it, this is with you for life. I've done a lot of reading that says that actually in a lot of people it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you will ultimately then like think that, and it will happen. So by saying that to you, they could have caused you to spend the next 20 years of your life just kind of in this vicious cycle. What actually got you? Most people would have just not accepted it, but most people would have, in a really depressing way, accepted it and not believe they'd get better. What was it about your mindset at that point? Because you said you were dealing with a lot of like mental health issues at that point. Like, what was it that you refused to accept that? Like, what was it at that time?
I mean, with the depression and anxiety, it was like having a wasp flying around my head that I couldn't see. So this constant annoyance that wouldn't allow me to be normal or actually have normal interactions with people. And I was so tired of that. Like I'm a pretty sociable person. So like going out with my friends, I'm starting to experience anxiety just being at a bar. Going out with my friends, like I started to feel pretty depressed, and like the weight of my situation started to crumble in. And, I started to pick up more books on like psychology, mental health, Alan Watts, for example, somebody who's an amazing speaker. And these people were just talking about, how my mindset can change my outcome or my reality. And I believed it. And I wasn't going to these doctors were letting me down left and right with their medications and their fake diagnoses of what they think this is, because they didn't even know what Lyme disease was.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, like it's really up to me to figure out about me. And I only know what's best for me in this situation. And not in an arrogant way, but I knew they didn't feel what it was like to be inside my body. I knew they could say, okay, show me your chronic pain. It's everywhere, and there was just no way I was going to go down.
Yeah.
There was no way I wasn't going to let myself go down further, because the further down I went, it was like, okay, well, the only thing I think would heal this is death. And that's like, that turns into suicidal thoughts. And I knew that wasn't me. So when I started to realize these like suicidal thoughts or the ending of this chronic disease through an exit or like some miracle thing, I knew that wasn't possible. And I was ready to take any step necessary to fix that or get out of that. And if that meant I only got out of the mindset that was holding me down and making me think I couldn't do the things I normally could, I was willing to do that. And that just came from, I was willing to do anything.
Yeah.
Literally.
It's really, because ultimately what ended up healing you was something different. But if you hadn't have had that mindset switch initially, then you wouldn't have been able to get to the point where you had to get to heal. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that initial step was such a challenging place, because there were literally two paths I was looking at. Like, okay, like I can die and just give up on life and just be this vegetable that sits and takes all these pills, or I can figure out actively and face this thing. And especially the mindset that comes with anxiety and depression. Like they're very disabling mindsets, and I wasn't allowing those mindsets to win.
Also, like, I mean, it's less of an issue here in the UK, but from what I understand in the States, and there are people who listen to this podcast who are from the States, there's a lot of, it's like the medication is just everywhere, isn't it? It's so easy to get access to, and that is the first port of call for any doctor. And so then once you get reliant on a medication, it's very difficult to get out of that. I went to a stem cell clinic in Germany to get treatment, and I was there with a few other people from the States, and they asked me what I was on medication-wise, and I was on nothing. And then everyone in there, they were on something for every part of their body. They were on something. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to say that for you to say that there was those two paths there, and one was that kind of heavily medicated vegetable, kind of reliant on that, and then the other one was, you know, the path that you ended up going down. Had you always kind of shirked away from like being like medicated? Was that also, or was this like a new thing in this situation?
Well, being American, it's pretty easy for my doctor to immediately prescribe me something anytime I go to them. So I'm used to that mindset of like, you don't feel well, you take this. You don't, you know, you're feeling anxious during the day, you take this, you know. And I had so many friends that were very heavily medicated by doctors, and I could still see they were severely depressed. Like the medication didn't really do much for them. It brought them into this place of no feeling. And I think that's such an essential part of being human. It's like, I want to feel life. I want to know what it feels like. I know maybe it's hard to be sad and it's hard to be depressed or whatever, but I'd rather feel that. So yeah, I was there, but there was also this opposition that was created when I was younger. My grandmother, she actually worked a lot with plant medicine. She was an herbalist, and she had this company called Aurora Herbs. And so she was always anti-doctor. My mother was pro-doctor. So I'm between these two sides of like, take this flower for your headache or take this Advil for your headache. And ironically, I actually found my grandmother's medication worked a lot better, even though I didn't really believe in it. I'm like, you're just taking plants. So that really stuck with me. And I realized that was a better route than putting a bunch of chemicals in my body. And I think that also comes from like exercise culture as well. We want to eat organic. We want to eat clean. We want to read the labels on certain things that we're putting in our body because we don't know what the chemicals are. And so I was getting away from the chemical side and going more to the natural side.
Yeah, definitely. And what something else that kind of comes through a lot with you and a lot with the people that have been on this podcast first is taking control yourself and not waiting for someone else to come and do it for you, which is it's actually really difficult when, you know, you look at a lot of other normal diseases, if that's even a thing, but, you know, normal kind of traditional medical conditions. The doctor comes in, you know, takes the problem away for you almost and just says, this is what you need to do for 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days and you'll be better. Whereas with this situation, it's something I've struggled with because I'm just not really a great researcher, is like, you've got to develop your own plan and it's a lot of trial and error. And so did you feel that was a big thing for you actually? And how soon did you do that? Like taking control yourself and kind of spearheading your own recovery rather than having a doctor do that for you?
I think it was when I went back to the doctor and asked them about my anxiety and depression and what I could do about that. And they were like, here's Ritalin. Because it was, to me, it was just such a surface response to something that was such a deep issue for me. And at that point, I'm like, okay, you know what? Thank you for your recommendation. And thank you for, you know, trying to help me, I guess. But I need to find something else because this is not, I don't want to go down the path of Ritalin or Xanax or any of these antidepressants. I'm not chronically depressed. You know, I'm not chronically anxious. It's like, this is something that has come upon me. And so since this is a bacteria that's now a part of me, I'm going to find a way to get rid of this bacteria. And so that's where marijuana came in, because I was talking to some friends. I'm like, hey, you know, like I have a lot of body pain. And they're like, oh, well, there's this plant I know. And if you smoke it, you know, your body pain will go away. And so I did. And just to see that immediate effect, instead of this long-term drawn out process of taking a pill after pill after pill to normalize myself, you know, one hit of cannabis actually brought me into a place of, I don't feel pain and I'm calm. And that was such a shocker. And I was like, okay, well, I can take my health in my own hands.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need anything else.
I think what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the plant medicine side of things and kind of how that has an impact. I think it's important before we do to say that I think that, you know, this route, and you might disagree, but I'm pretty sure, you know, I've heard from a lot of people who have gone into this, it's not necessarily for everyone, and it won't necessarily work for everyone. I guess it's important to caveat that with this. And I think you've got to be at the right time for you to do something like that, like this. But also, I think anyone who had never heard of ayahuasca and was listening to you say that someone was like speaking to you about it, I think it's important for you to explain kind of the mechanics behind that. So could you just talk a little bit about, just the mushroom experience that led you to that, and then also what ayahuasca is, what it does, and why actually that would help someone with a chronic health issue, and what you feel it actually did for you. Sorry, that was about 4 questions.
I'll try and hit them one after another. So first was the mushroom question.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took psilocybin mushrooms, which is a psychedelic mushroom. And it was my first time ever taking psychedelics. I wasn't really sure what it was going to bring. I heard that it can, get rid of depression, anxiety, so forth and so on. So I had this very surface level understanding of what this mushroom was. But after I took it, I started to realize I knew nothing about psychedelics whatsoever. And the fact that they can open my mind to a grander scale of what it is, my mind is, really fascinated me. And so, all my friends, we were doing this together, and they're all sitting and playing Mario Kart, and I felt like that didn't really resonate with me. So I go outside and I sat with nature, and in that space of being with nature, I started to open more into the inner space of myself. And in opening more to the inner space of myself, I started to see, how my mind was functioning in this illness, how my mind was functioning day to day. How was that limiting my actions or my interactions or my beliefs of what I could do? And the fact that I heard ayahuasca in Peru was such a strange thing. And I didn't really understand how or why it did that till years later when I came down here to work with ayahuasca. And so ayahuasca is a combination of 2 plants. It's a vine and leaves. The ayahuasca vine is the main vine. It's an MAO inhibitor. And the leaves, chapruna, are they're actually what contain the DMT, the dimethyltryptamine that causes the visions. And so these indigenous tribes have discovered thousands of years ago, we don't know how many years ago, they all have different stories, that once you mix these 2 plants together and drink it, you're able to open yourself to a greater vision or a greater perspective of your world and the world around you. And so, working with these tribes, they say that the root of all of our illnesses is actually in our minds. It's not a physical thing. The root, the physical manifestation is just the fruit of what's happening in the mind. And so when they told me that, I'm like, actually, I got Lyme disease, a tick bit me. So what do you mean? How is that in my mind? And I'm pretty skeptical. So I was very skeptical at first and just kind of refuting everything they were saying until I had, my first 7 experiences with ayahuasca. And, what happened is they started to change the total belief system around myself, just my personal world, and how I view healing in itself. And because that perception was changed, I started to have the capacity to believe I was going to heal, to believe that I could heal, to believe that I know what's best for my body. And even just knowing those things, those 3 things, I actually did heal. And sure, it took time, and it took me being very skeptical and questioning and annoying these poor Shipibo people over and over again. Of, how dare you think that this plant is going to change my world? Anyways, but it is strange. It is a psychedelic, and dimethyltryptamine is the strongest psychedelic chemical on the planet because it relates the most closely to natural brain chemistry. And so, the reason I came to Peru is because these tribes have been doing this healing work for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they really understand the methods of healing. And I've been blown away, 1, by the results, because I'm now symptom-free from Lyme disease, and 2, just watching people come in, thousands of people. I worked at a large center, watching thousands of people come in and receive healing by taking a plant and being sung to by these indigenous people. And it's a bit unbelievable because it's so fringe, But at the same time, I've watched it, and I have a scientific mind. So watching people come through and seeing them change and leave and have lasting changes, I couldn't refute it. So I was like, okay, I got to learn, hopefully, how to do this, you know?
And I've got loads of questions now, actually. But you did a great job of answering my multiple questions. I realised I've got like this habit of just I've got all of these questions in my head, so I say them all at once and expect.
Oh, that's amazing.
So first of all, I just really want to acknowledge anyone listening to this who, when they hear the word drug, thinks of like, you know, cocaine or anything like that. This isn't. It's. I think there's a negative connotation with the word drug, and I think it really does need to be viewed as plant medicine, and it needs to be. It's almost the intent. This is a natural thing. It's not something that's been made by man, and also the intention behind it is not to, you know, go out and have a good time or to escape your worries. It's actually the complete opposite. And I think I had to kind of get my head around that when I heard, you know, psychedelics. My brother's talked to me about it for years, and I've always just gone, not for me, not for me. So I just want to say that to anyone listening who's kind of skeptical. It's the intention behind it. It's, you know, it's natural. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is really interesting, because I'm at the moment going through this, doing this thing online. It's called the Gupta program. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's about brain retraining for chronic health issues, and a lot of it is that basically people with chronic health issues, they were exposed to something like, you know, Lyme bacteria or mold or with chronic fatigue, for example, it was EBV, and then they get, because of that, they get, their body thinks that they are always being exposed to that, and they're, because of their symptoms, and then they're all just on high alert, and they're basically in a constant fight or flight mode, and because of that, they never actually, their mindset is basically, oh, I can't heal, I can't, there's nothing, they can't get themselves out of that vicious cycle of believing that they can't heal, if that makes sense. I'm doing a really bad job of explaining
No,
this.
absolutely. Yeah.
But that's exactly what you were saying then, and that it opens your mind to another reality that actually shows you that you can heal. And it almost sounds like plant medicine maybe is a bit more of a shortcut, which sounds great in a way. But I think that is so important for me personally. I know what I've got is real. I know it would. I'm genetically susceptible to mold, so it does cause me issues. However, I know that also I'm mentally scarred from the years of having it, which makes me a lot more. It inhibits my ability to get better, and so that was a really long explanation of what I read from what you were saying. But is that accurate in the sense that someone coming in like me, for example, or a lot of people who have been ill for years, is it really is what the plant medicine doing is breaking that barrier of like them actually fully believing that they can get better deep down?
Absolutely. I mean, one way I can put it is we all have this image of ourselves in our head, and this image is not necessarily true or real. It's something that's developed over the time through memories, through traumas, through experience, and it has this facade. And, you know, especially when we get a chronic illness, it is a trauma. It's a trauma to the system. It's a trauma to our mental faculties, you know, in so many different ways. And so what these plant medicines do is they go into that space where we have this mental image of ourselves. They open it up even broader so we can actually look upon that mental image and change it. And so, you know, like in my case where the doctor says, this is a chronic illness, there is no curing it. That's a trauma. You know, that's like, you know, some part of me did believe that. And so I had to come into this medicine with this belief of I'm sick for the rest of my life. You know, it doesn't matter what I try, I'm not going to get rid of it. It's there forever. And that's traumatizing. That's a very limiting belief. And so, you know, in zooming out with these plant medicines, with these natural plants, I had the capacity to look at myself and be like, do I really want to believe this? Do I really want to believe I can't do anything? Do I want to believe I'm traumatized? Even that. And I didn't. I want to be free in every way I can be. And so, these traditions, they help us to remove these traumas so that we can live a more full life. And even if we do have a chronic illness, we're going to face it completely different. That persona is not weighed down by the trauma or the backpack of bricks, that's dragging us down. We're going to keep pursuing better and better options, and it's all mindset.
And what was and this is really purely out of interest, because I spoke to you offline, like I'm definitely, before COVID, this was something that I was going to book in and go and have one of these experiences. And even just having this conversation now, I know I need to do it. I'd have to try and explain it to my mum because she won't understand and won't appreciate it at all. Hopefully she's not listening to this. But in terms of the experience you actually had, because I know, as you said, the DMT, which is actually a natural thing that all humans produce, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what causes the kind of hallucinogenic experiences. And a lot of people see stuff they don't want to see, but it's stuff they need to confront. So what was it you saw, and like, how did that play into you recovering?
Well, I may not share directly what I saw as far as the trauma, but there was definitely noticing and being aware of a grander trauma that happened at a younger age. And so as the onset of the chronic Lyme's is anxiety and depression, it was being fed by this trauma, this root of this trauma that was further back in my childhood. And so once I started to address that and the weakness in that, or in the pain in that, I could face that anxiety, depression like it was just like, here on camera, I'm looking at it. And so being able to face that without the context of the trauma from my past, it was able to be healed so much faster. And so, yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's not fun to see our flaws. It's not fun to see what's holding us back, because usually they are traumas. Usually there are challenging memories or challenging behaviors or addictions that are actually holding us back. And for me, it was trauma. I had a lot of traumas growing up as a kid, and I didn't realize how much of an impact that would have when I had a trigger such as chronic Lyme disease, where my body was deteriorating, my mind was deteriorating. Like, it was like, okay, well, now that's all your defenses are gone, here's your trauma.
Yeah.
And so with ayahuasca, I think a lot of people have this misconception of psychedelics. They see like TV shows where they're, they see like floating mushrooms and like crazy colors. Sure, maybe. I mean, out of all the people I've worked with, I know about 150 of them have had those kind of experiences. But a lot of other people have had very profound self-reflective experiences where they have the opportunity to actually just go back and look at themselves. And like I said, with that, being able to look at the grander persona that we've created in our mind, once we have a grander picture of that, we see our flaws, yeah, but we also see how we can move forward. And so, in my case, it was like, I need to heal my traumas back here, or else this trauma of chronic Lyme's is not going to be healed ever. So by facing that, I could face that smaller trauma of chronic Lyme's,
Yeah. And I actually, another thing that interests me about it is that I hear a lot of people go there for addictions and will work with addiction, which is, an even more ingrained part of someone's mindset. I've actually I haven't got like any serious addictions, but I've got a very addictive personality. I'm not a very moderate person. I find it really easy to go cold turkey on things, like coffee as an example. I can go months without drinking a coffee. The minute I have one, I'm drinking 3 or 4 a day. And there's something there in my mindset where I can't have that kind of in between. And as far as I understand, that it also helps that kind of your personality as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, through the research of Gabor Mate, who's also working with ayahuasca, he's discovered that a lot of addictions is actually stemming from a trauma, or a lot of extremism is a way to suppress an emotion that starts to arise when we're not feeling something else, like a caffeine boost or or whatever it is, and it can go to its extremes of heroin and so forth and so on. So yeah, I think, within the context of ayahuasca, we have the opportunity to see the habitual pattern of putting something into our system to suppress a memory. I know that I've done that for years as well.
And so just like where are you at today? You said you're symptom free, which is amazing, but this has led you to, we spoke before being on the podcast, this is now like your 8th year in Peru. You stayed down there, your life has been profoundly changed. What is it you do, like for work? What is it? I know you're very much involved in ayahuasca. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Currently, I actually serve ayahuasca down here in Peru. I worked with these tribes, the Shipibo tribe, and I trained with them for years. And through their permission, I've actually been given permission to share this medicine with other people. And so, which was a large part of my goal being here, was actually to learn how to share what they had gifted to me. And so now we have smaller groups. I work in very small groups of people, maybe 4 people maximum. And we do very deep integrative healing work, both with ayahuasca inside ceremony, is what we call it, and outside ceremony. So having discussions with people, helping them process the information that they're seeing in the ceremony. And what we notice is it's a big challenge with this work, taking a psychedelic plant medicine and working with a tradition that's not English speaking, is people get very confused or lost in these medicine worlds, because there's a very specific framework of language that is involved with plant medicine. It's very strange. We're working with the mind. And so when Westerners come down, they try and ask, their healer or the tribe there, like, what is happening to me? The tribe is like, it's a ghost. And they're like, how does that help me? And so having an English bridge to actually explain what's going on internally during your processes is super important. And so that's basically all we really offer is, these very intimate healing ceremonies with this plant medicine ayahuasca, along with English translation of more of your experience. So
do you think that, because what I said before was that maybe it's actually not the right path for everyone, and actually I think the message I get here, I mean, I think that it's something I need to do, but I think that for anyone listening to this, it's more of a message to, you've got to focus on not just, taking, if you're prescribed a certain medication or certain supplements or whatever, you've also got to look at the mindset as well, like in terms of your, like stuff like I talked about, basically that brain retraining, something that will actually, switch that switch in your mind. Do you agree with that? Do you think it is for everyone, or no?
No, I don't think it's for everyone. Absolutely not. And I think there's so many ways to for a person to find their own healing. I think the challenge is just discovering what it is. I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, my doctor says this is the best method of healing. I believe that. And if you believe that and that's working for you, man, that's perfect. Meditation, breath work, mind retraining, they're all super valid ways of healing. It just, for me, I have a very hard head, and I'm a bit stubborn, so I needed something a bit more forceful. And this was more forceful for me in this experience. And this was more, I couldn't really disbelieve it. It was too in my face. And that's what I was looking for, instead of like medication and believing in a doctor. It was like I needed firsthand experience of my own healing. But again, it's not for everyone. The challenging thing is we do a lot of medical screening before people come, and a lot of people are on SSRIs or antidepressants. And so because ayahuasca has it's a serotonin suppressor, you can't come in with SSRIs, or else it'll cause harm to the body. So we have to be very, very, very careful with people coming in. We do a lot of medical questionnaire before they come in to make sure this is actually the right fit for them.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have to be ready, and willing to face yourself in a very, in front of a very clean, very strong mirror as ayahuasca. If you're not willing to do the work to face that, it can be very confronting. you know.
Yeah, and that's difficult for a lot of people, particularly people who just, I guess their goal is they just want to recover. And if they can do it through, one of my good friends came on and recovered from chronic fatigue, and he's actually recently started to get into psychedelics, and
Awesome.
he's probably going to be doing ayahuasca, and he's had some really good experiences, but he recovered from chronic fatigue through meditation, and through going really advanced into meditation. And I Wim Hof breathing, that kind of stuff. I know that there's a lot of good in that as well. But yeah, I think I'm a bit like you in the sense that maybe need something a bit more transformative that's, big in one go. But then maybe that's my addictive personality, my all or nothing personality that's coming through. In terms of I think I know the answer to this, but what for you are you grateful? What things have changed because of your illness that you're really grateful for? What are the positive things that have happened? And if you look back on it, do you actually think that it was, if someone could say that someone could have come across and said, right, you don't have Lyme disease anymore, get on with your life, would you go back and have that happen?
No, there's no way I would change that. I think if it weren't for Lyme disease, I would never have discovered these other traumas, or maybe I would have, but not in a way that I was able to heal it in such a supportive environment. It's led me on such an incredible journey to more myself, to actually discover belief in myself, as far as what's changed, I'm happy. I live a good life. I'm healthy. I can eat red meat again. I had, the Lone Star tick makes you allergic to red meat, so I really like that. I like hamburgers. I'm American. But yeah, to have had that experience and to see that it's possible to heal and to be able to even just share that through words is a great gift. So I'm very grateful to this chronic illness for what it's given to me. And I don't even want to call it chronic anymore. It's
yeah, that's right. And then finally, there's going to be a question I like to ask is just, I guess someone listening to this is always probably thinking when they're listening to someone who has recovered, it's difficult to relate to them because I know they've recovered. They're on the other side. It feels so far away from me. What advice would you give to someone, not from a practical point of view, just from a mental point of view, right now, who's going through a really tough time, who's going through exactly what you were going through and really can't see any way out? I think the word you used was hopeless, and is feeling that way. What advice would you give to them right now?
Well, hopelessness is a hole that we've dug for ourselves because we're feeding it. And if I can relate anything from a place of hopelessness, it's that the only place is up, or the only way out is up. The only way through my mindset is up. I don't have two choices. We don't have two choices. You can give up on yourself, but what does that mean? You can't actually. You can never give up on yourself. Don't give up, and just realize that hopelessness is a pit that you've dug for yourself, and no one else has put you there. Once we realize that we can do it, it doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter how big the hill is, we can always make it up the mountain.
That was a really good answer.
Thanks, man.
If anyone wants to reach out to you, you talked through a lot of really interesting topics, and I'm sure there might be, the odd person that's actually thinking, wow, this could be something that I would be interested in. If people want to reach out to you, I'll put it in the show notes, but how would they do that?
The best way is through bodyofprana.com, which is our website for the business that we run down here. So bodyofprana.com, BODYOF, and you'll put it, I guess you put it in there. Sorry, I'm spelling it out there.
Yeah, I guess in case someone's listening to it right now and doesn't want to look at the show notes, Prana spelled Prana, right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
not everyone's heard of that word. Cool. Yeah. That's honestly been one of my favorite podcasts, and I knew it would be just because, really interested to see how you've got to the position you're in, doing what you've done. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.